What's good, Shellheads? We are back with another ranking, and this time we're going to be going through the turtles on the big screen. We're ranking all of the movies from least favorite to most favorite. And what I want you guys to do is sound off down in the comment section and let me know your list. Remember, everybody's list is going to be different. I'm actually curious to see what you guys have to say about the top tier of my list because I'm pretty sure my list is gonna look different than most of y'all's list. And remember, we are a community, so sound off, share your list, and just enjoy the fact that we all have Turtles content that resonates with us. So, starting off the festivities, we have to talk about an honorable mention. When we ranked the TV series, we talked about Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, in 2022, they came out with a continuation, kind of a capstone movie that was straight to Netflix. I'm putting it in honorable mention because I don't qualify it as a movie in the same way that I would qualify the rest of the list as a movie. If it's one of your favorites, feel free to leave it in the actual ranking. But for me, it's an honorable mention. For those of you that haven't seen it, the film follows Leonardo as he and the turtles save the world from Krang. So pretty straightforward turtles story. It's fine, but I just wouldn't put it with the rest of the list. So, getting into the list proper, at the bottom of the list for me is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows from 2016. I am not the biggest fan of the Michael Bay movies. I really wasn't a big fan of when I'm not a big fan of Michael Bay in general, and I, like a lot of fans, kind of rolled my eyes when I heard that Michael Bay would be taking the helm on the Turtles. But it is what it is. We got it. And I know that for some people, they really enjoy these movies. Just for me, it really wasn't my cup of tea. I do think that we got a lot of the tentpole characters. You know, you have Baxter Stockman, you have Bebop, you have Rocksteady, you even have Krang, which you would think that with that lineup of characters, that this movie would have more redeeming qualities to it. I just kind of thought it was a mess. I'm not the biggest fan of the way that the turtles are portrayed. I don't think it's the same kind of nightmare fuel that some others would put it to be. But for me, there were too many things going on, and it was a little too all over the place for my liking. And well, yeah, I think it is what it is. Next up, to nobody's surprise, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from 2014. And the only reason really that this one ends up higher on the list than the last one is, well, the sequel tends to end up lower on the list than the original. I thought that this reboot, I could see what they were going for with the Transformers reboot that had just taken place. It was very much in that kind of aesthetic, all of that kind of stuff. And I will say there are probably more redeeming qualities for me for this one than its sequel. But all in all, I just kind of thought it was boring. The one thing I will say that works as almost like a fault is April O'Neil. If you're going to put the that character at the forefront of the movie, do so in a way that doesn't conflict with the backstory that you're trying to give with the turtles. And honestly, when it comes to the turtles and it comes to Splinter, there's so much there that you can pull from that I just didn't see the need to really deviate from what we knew to be and what we know to be the classic Turtles storyline. I just think that they take a lot of liberties with a lot of these characters that I'm just not really on board for. It's not a terrible movie. I'm not going to sit here and say, "Oh, this movie sucks," because I think that that's a boring take in my opinion because there's a lot of redeeming qualities about each one of these movies to a lot of different people. So what I don't necessarily appreciate, you may love about this, and I know for a lot of people this was their introduction to the Turtles, and it's going to become clear what my introduction to the Turtles was as we get further down into my list. So if the Michael Bay movies are your cup of tea, if the era of that kind of dirty aesthetic where everything looks like it was shot in a desert and Megan Fox is playing the lead in just about everything, then awesome. I hope you love these movies and I hope that this was a gateway to a love affair with the Turtles, like some of my favorite movies were. But for me, these kind of end up low on my list. They're just not my favorite. Next up is TMNT from 2007. This was the one that was CGI. And honestly, I think they did a better job with this than the live actions. I think this ended up as a prettier product. I think it just all around looks better. The story here begins after they defeated the Shredder, which is honestly not a bad attempt to the story to taking on that story. And honestly, that's not a bad attempt at taking on the story. I think that there are aspects of the Shredder story that are always great to tell, but there's so much of the turtle story that is separate from Shredder that it doesn't hurt to do one that isn't centered around Shredder, especially because as we get into the 90s era, and as we get into some of the other versions, a lot of that stuff really does center a lot around Shredder. So why not do something that's different? And all in all, I think it's a really cool inclusion to focus on Shredder's second in command, Karai, who plays a very significant part in the Turtles lore, in the Turtles mythos. That coupled with the highlight of all of the different personalities that the turtles have, that's one of the coolest parts of the turtles is each one of them have a very distinct personality. Overall, this is a really solid turtles movie. Next up, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3. Okay, hold the phone because I know for a lot of people you were wondering, since this wasn't at the bottom of the list, where this was going to pop up. I'll be the first one to admit, for me, this has a lot to do with nostalgia. For those of you that don't know, this is the one that should have just basically been Turtles in Time. And Turtles in Time is a whole storyline. I'll be the first one to admit they went part of the way with Turtles in Time. And this movie has a long history, and we're going to get into covering in depth each one of these movies. That's why I'm not giving you a full breakdown here and now. But this was one that was plagued with studio involvement and greed and a lot of different things. And so with this one, this should have just been Turtles in Time. But I think if you're able to separate out what could have been from what was, I honestly don't think that this is a terrible movie in the same way that a lot of people make it out to be. So, this is the one where they go to feudal Japan because of a magical scepter. And in the past, hijinks ensue. It's very comical, a la the 80s cartoon. I really thought that if you kind of take a look at the '80s cartoon and say, okay, this is what would it would be like if the '80s cartoon was made into a live action movie. I think it forgives a lot of the sins. I know not most people are not going to agree with me, but that's my opinion. I will admit that the costumes took a very significant dive, and my favorite turtle is gone for a large portion of it. But all in all, I think that this movie is better than some make it out to be. But again, I grew up on these movies. I have very distinct memories of watching the original three with my cousins. And so for me, nostalgia is going to play a significant portion of my take on what this looks like. Next up, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 Secret of the Ooze in 91. I could hear an argument for this being the top of somebody's list. This is getting to this point. These are, I enjoy watching most of these movies pretty much from the 2007 movie on. I there's something to enjoy for each one of these, but I could see how this could be somebody's absolute favorite because it really dives into the mutagen aspect of the storyline of the turtles, but this time it's in the hands of Shredder and he uses it to create Toka and Razor. We'll get into another time the whole story of if you're doing the mutagen, why not just do Bebop and Rocksteady? And the answer is studio. The answer is people's opinions and a lot of different moving pieces. But famously, Kevin Eastman was not a big fan of Toka and Razor and all of that. So there's a lot of behind the scenes drama and turmoil. But I thought that they were fun inclusions to the stories. I don't think everything needs to exactly mirror everything else that came before it. So I personally like Toka and Razor, and he himself, famously played by former wrestler Kevin Nash, becomes Super Shredder. This one is a lot campier. This one is a lot sillier, and honestly, it's a lot more fun than the ones that came before it. And I don't mean fun as in better. I mean fun as in it emphasizes that portion of it. Yes, there are a lot more jokes, there's a lot more nonsense, but that to me is part of the charm. The storyline of it is really good if you are a fan of the various forms of turtle storytelling. I know for a lot of people they say that the this movie does not hold up as an adult. I could not disagree more. I think that this movie absolutely holds up as an adult, but again, nostalgia is what it is. Next up on the list is 2009's Turtles Forever. Who's shocked that a collaboration between my top two favorite versions of the TV Turtles coming together would rank so high on my list? For those of you that don't know, this was a celebration effort of the 25th anniversary of the franchise. This was a crossover event between the original comics Turtles, the 87 Turtles, and the current iteration of the Turtles at that time. And it's awesome. They poke fun at the seriousness of the comics. They poke fun at the lighthearted nature of the 80s. Honestly, this is chef's kiss. This is honestly amazing to me that this was even created and absolutely a love letter to shellheads like myself. The runner up on my list is 2019's Batman versus the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. For those of you that don't know, this is the film adaptation of what was originally a comic book crossover between Batman and the Turtles. And it's really cool to see two of my favorite fandoms cross over with one another, and they to see this uneasy alliance from Batman's side, this unlikely pairing of heroes of Batman, Batgirl, and Robin forging an alliance with the Turtles to fight against the combination of Shredder, who's teamed up with Ra's al Ghul and the League of Assassins. And it's just really cool to see these worlds combined in such a well done way that really takes the time to care for both versions of these stories, both of these different IPs that are very different in a lot of ways, but really highlights what makes them so compatible. And drum roll, please. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from 1990. This was the first. This was the first adaptation of the Turtles in on the big screen in live action, and guys, this was the best. So this really is a love letter to the comics. It's got a dark and gritty aesthetic. I don't just mean it in a subject material way, though that is part of it. It actually has that lived in 80s, early 90s New York setting where everything just looks like it's got a layer of grime over it, and I absolutely love it. The story itself is depressing. There are light if you're coming to the Turtles for lightheartedness, for camp, all of that kind of stuff, then there are different versions of the Turtles for you. But this really takes the comics in and adapts them to live action in a very cool way. We see the Shredder starting an army, which we know is the Foot Clan. We see him basically taking in street kids and turning them into fighters. We see the Turtles in peril. We see Master Splinter. And guys, we see some of the best action and choreography that really exists as what is essentially supposed to be a kids movie. And we cannot not talk about Jim Henson's puppet suits for the Turtles. Wow, the best that has been done as far as those that version of showcasing the Turtles. I just think that you don't get any better for live action than this movie, and it has to be number one. Not to mention, it's a legitimately good movie. The story's good, it's well paced, it's not schlocky for what is supposed to be a cartoon movie or a cartoon inspired movie. So, all around, number one. All right, guys, that's my list. Like I said, I want you to chime in down below and let me know where you would rank the different movies. Let me know what you think of my list. And remember, we're all here for the same reason. So let's be a community and show some love to each other's lists as well. For now, take it easy, Shellheads.